Hey, welcome to the channel, welcome to this video. Today we're going to be talking all about Zelda. I don't know if you could tell, I'm a little bit of a Zelda fan. I love Zelda. I've loved Zelda ever since I first played A Link to the Past. That was my very first Zelda game I ever played, and over the years my love for Zelda games has just grown stronger. It's been really cool to see the series veer into new, uncharted wilderness for its type of game. But I have a love for both the old style and the new style and everything in between. Well, except that one game.
Oh boy, I'm so hungry I could eat an Octorok.
So I decided I'm gonna do my top 5 Zelda games of all time. Now you're probably gonna hate this list, but look, this is my list. These are the Zelda games that I find the most enjoyable. Let's get into my top 5 Zelda games. Here we go. Starting off with number 5 on my list is The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. To sum up why I love this Zelda game so much, it's so weird. That's it. Simple, right? But let's dive into the details. First off, the game was made by Capcom, which most likely lends to its weirdness. Of course, when I first played the game, I didn't know this, nor did I care. But in my later years, it made a lot of sense. I'd played various Zelda games by this point, and honestly, at the time I played, I wasn't a huge Nintendo fan. I saw the game in GameStop. I really enjoyed the art style, especially since it looked a lot like Wind Waker, and I could play the game on my DS thanks to that cool backwards compatibility that was built in. Once I booted up the game, there was something very different about the way the game began. It felt like it had a bit more story than the usual Zelda game, especially at that time. A festival is a neat backdrop to the introduction to both Zelda and Link, and it was neat seeing this town so alive before doom and gloom. Of course, everything goes south very quickly, and the weirdness continues on. The whole intro section of the game, the festival being crashed and Zelda being turned into a statue, is capped off by a not Ganon bad guy. And this was the next indicator of the weirdness of the game. I hadn't experienced a non-canon antagonist since A Link to the Past. Even that had some ties to good boy Ganon. So this shocked me a bit. Vati was mysterious, was a fresh character in the series, and instantly led to the cool gimmick of the game. The gimmick in Minish Cap is that you shrink down to an incredibly small size, which leads meeting the Minish, a race of small beings that live amongst the Highlands in the game, super cool. Again, weirdness, but in a way that I really enjoyed. Being able to shrink and grow back to normal size was a neat mechanic, but the introduction to the Minish and Ezlo were my favorite part of all this. I loved the lore of the Minish and even found enjoyment amidst the annoying chatter of Ezlo. By the end, Ezlo had become a bit endearing though. I would not disagree if someone said he was annoying. So, a mainline Zelda game being made by another developer, the unfamiliar antagonist, the wacky gimmick, and the introduction of a whole new race of beings in the world of Zelda. Minish Cap is such an odd Zelda game, and I love it for being that way. My number 4 spot for favorite Zelda game is a bit odd. There are parts of this entry that I don't really jive with, but the parts that I do jive with are so exceptional that it lifts the game to a high spot on my list. This Zelda is Twilight Princess. Let's start with the stuff I don't care for. First, I'm actually not a huge fan of the art style. When it originally released, I really enjoyed it a lot, but over time I have grown less fond of it. Personally, I don't think it has aged well, but like any top 5 list, this is all purely preference. I'm also not a huge fan of the start of the game. There was too much fluff, too much story before the really good stuff started to happen. It's not that I don't like the thought behind it, and on paper it seemed like a really good setup for the rest of the game. It just took a bit too long, but once the story gets going and Link is thrust out into the world outside the village, the game starts to take off. The final thing I don't care for are the wolf sections. Again, these are super cool on paper, and there are definitely moments in them and aspects that are really neat, but I found it a bit monotonous fighting the group of enemies and finding tears of light. Okay, now that those are out of the way, let's talk about all the good the game does. The story in Twilight Princess, in a nutshell, is that you play as Link, who grows up in a small rural village. Outlandish idea, right? One day, some evil horse riders show up, take your childhood friend away, who is not Zelda. It's then that you learn you have to grow up fast to take care of those you love. This leads to being drawn into Twilight and turning into a wolf, meeting a mysterious figure named Midna, who is connected to Zelda in some way. This is where Link's journey begins. As I mentioned, there are a lot of things that seem like they should be cool, but ultimately fell flat with me. However, there are things that are straight up cool on both paper and in practice. The sounds and music whenever the Twilight Beasts show up in Twilight is so unsettling, and I love it. Also, the art style may not be my favorite, but many of the character designs are so damn good. For instance, though I'm not a fan of the wolf segments themselves, I absolutely adore the design of Wolf Link, and I love when Midna begins riding him. But the real reason I placed Twilight Princess in my top 5 Zelda games of all time are the dungeons. The Temple of Time and Sky Dungeons are highlights, especially when using the double claw shot, which is such a cool mechanic and a Zelda game tool. But as good as those dungeons are, the star that elevates this game for me is Snow Peak Ruins. This dungeon sticks out in the best of ways. It doesn't look like a typical Zelda dungeon, nor does it feel like one. Plus, the story told with this couple in the mansion and the absolutely creepy design of the final boss of the dungeon just make this one of the best Zelda dungeons ever, and quite possibly my favorite Zelda dungeon in the series. The focus on a more adult experience within Twilight Princess has its pros and cons, but the pros far outweigh the cons, especially when it comes to the cool factor in that special dungeon that is Snow Peak Ruins. Man, talking about this makes me want to go replay it, just to play Snow Peak Ruins again. My number 3 spot belongs to Link's Awakening. I enjoy both Link's Awakening DX and the remake that is on the Nintendo Switch, but I first played the former on my Game Boy Color, so we'll stick with that one. In such a short cutscene, the development team behind the game is able to tell the story that sets up the rest of the game. Link is sailing at sea and is hit by a massive storm. He then washes ashore a mysterious island, which he later finds out is named Koholint. Shortly after being washed ashore, he is greeted by Marin and her father, Terran. From there, the adventure begins and Link must wake up the sleeping windfish. Yes, windfish. You heard me correctly. Oh, and this fish is sleeping inside a giant egg. This is one reason I love this game. It almost feels like if Tim Burton were to make a Zelda game. It's not the pure weirdness that I found in Minish Cap, but has a general feel of just being different. It's found in characters, environments, and more importantly, gameplay. To jump, you need a feather. To swim, you need flippers. Oh yeah, and then there is the introduction of Mario characters from the small side-scrolling bits of gameplay. Seeing Goombas going through sections of 2D platforming really got me to mark out. Do they matter to the game or affect it in any way? Not really, but it does make me love an already weird Zelda game. This game just feels so different from every other Zelda game, and it's wonderful for it. The other reason I love this game is the music. Good lord, the music. One of my all-time favorite Zelda songs is in this game. You could probably guess this, but it's definitely Tal Heights. Man, what a song that is. But there are so many other great tunes in the game, like Maid Village, The Mysterious Forest, and Ballad of the Windfish. This is where I think the remake shines most. Listen to the remade versions of these songs, especially Ballad of the Windfish. Link's Awakening feels like a fever dream of a Zelda game, and each time I return to it, I leave it feeling even more fondness for it. For the longest period of time, this Zelda entry was my number 1 Zelda game of all time. This was also the one Zelda game I knew almost nothing about. See, I didn't own a GameCube right away. In fact, I had a PS2 and didn't even consider getting a GameCube at the time. Thanks to the time period, where the internet was still growing but not as widely used as the tool it is today, I only knew about upcoming games through magazines and what people said. The only thing I knew about Wind Waker was that it had a kiddie art style that was nowhere near the level of Ocarina of Time. One day, I walked into EB Games, before it was renamed as GameStop, and I saw they had a deal with the GameCube. So, I grabbed my black GameCube system and 2 random games that looked neat to me, both of which would go on to be 2 of my favorite games of all time. One was Metroid Prime, and the other was Wind Waker. From the opening screen and the brilliant theme music, I was instantly grabbed by the stylish game. To this day, I love cel-shaded games. You can go watch my video on that actually, and I can trace it back to Wind Waker. It wasn't the visuals or the music that impressed me the most. No, it wasn't the neat gimmick and arguably the biggest flaw of having an ocean to traverse and explore, a true open world at the time. It was the expressions. Seeing Link's face change from scene to scene in such an expressive way captured my attention. Previous games use expressions, sure, but Wind Waker was on a whole other level for me. I laughed at the goofy faces Link made around his sister. I felt genuinely sad when his sister was taken away. The pirates' facial expressions as they loyally follow their captain, Tetra's smugness in full display on her face. Everything else in the game was just icing on the cake for me. To the surprise of probably nobody, I'm placing Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom in my number 1 spot. What might be surprising is cheating and putting 2 Zelda games as the top spot, but I pair them together because I really can't separate the 2. These games redefine 3D Zelda games, regardless of how you feel about them. If you're an old school Zelda fan, then you probably hate these games. If you're a newer Zelda fan or weren't a Zelda fan before, then you probably love these games. If you're crazy, like me, you enjoy the old style and these fantastic new ones. Fun fact, I do not care much for open world games anymore. Sure, there are occasional open world games that really grab my attention, but I'd rather have more focus placed on the gameplay or the story, or both. The go anywhere you want in any order type of game was initially amazing to me. I still have very fond memories of that first time stepping foot outside the vault in Fallout 3. However, over time, I grew tired of it. I'd much rather take a tailored piece of art than a painting using a giant canvas and incredibly broad strokes. So why in the world are Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom my top Zelda games? I could say it's the visual art style. I love the blend of past Zelda game styles into one coherent look. You could say it's the new characters added into these games. Look, I love me some Daruk, Urbosa, Cass, and Purah. You could say it's the minimalistic usage of music. To this day, I hear the Guardian music kick in and have a mini panic attack. But no, it's none of those things. It's how the game made me feel like a kid again, giving me a newfound sense of awe and exploration. Traveling across the countryside, running into various creatures and hidden secrets, really captured me. See, I grew up in a place called Humboldt County. If you look it up, you'll see some, well, let's say, unique things about it. Throughout junior high, high school, and earlier college years, I lived in the middle of giant redwood trees. I would walk out of my door and be greeted with nature. I absolutely love the forest, and I used to go out for hours at a time and just explore. Hike through the woods, find animals, see how far I could make it before I had to turn back. It sounds stupid, but playing Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom blended that feeling of pure exploration and my old love for video games into a nicely balanced experience that I will never forget. So, while I understand many will disagree with me on my pick here, well, this is my pick, and these Zelda games are going to be hard to be beaten. And those are my picks. That's my top 5 Zelda games. I would love to hear yours, and I really hope that I didn't, piss you off too much with my list, but I still would like to hear what your thoughts are. Thank you for watching, and until next time, bye.